Here Paul talk about jihad. For we know that the law is spiritual, but I am of the flesh, sold into slavery under sin. I don't understand my own actions, for I do not do what I want, but I do the very thing I hate. Now, if I do what I do not want, I agree that the law is good. But in fact, it is no longer I that do it, but sin that dwells within me. For I know that nothing good dwells within me, that is, in my flesh. I can will what is right, but I cannot do it. For I do not do the good that I want, but the evil I do not want to do is what I do. Now, if I do what I do not want to do, it is no longer I who do it, but the sin that dwells in me. And you know the rest of that passage. There's a struggle to be faithful, a struggle to be right before God. And this struggle is something that I have deepened, that I have been strengthened in, not just in my Sunday services with Christians, but in my conversation and walking with Muslims. A struggle they too have to live faithful in this world. The Good Samaritan story is a scary story. Or let's just say, it's handled in scary ways. Usually the way the Good Samaritan story is handled is that what we're told is that at the end of the story, the Christians are the Good Samaritan. That's the way we've always been told. But maybe we need to understand who Samaritans were. Let me start by saying we don't understand what Samaritans were. Samaritans today, they're Samaritans still, say one thing, Jews say another, and Assyrian sources say yet another. No one knew what to make of of Samaritans. Very similar with some of the earliest Christian thinkers didn't know what to do with Muslims. The similarity was striking, but the difference was even more striking. John of Damascus thought that Muslims were simply heretical Christians. I'll give him a break because it's early in Islam. I won't give Luther or Calvin a break for the way they spoke of Muslims. Shame on them. But I'll give him a break. We didn't know what to do with them. They were close enough to be kind of like us, but not really. But then they say this other thing, and then there's this other prophet. What's his name again? We didn't know what to do. In Christian times, we didn't know what to do with Samaritans either. We couldn't define them. We couldn't capture them. And so, most of us demonize them. Sounds familiar? I gotta ask, who's the Good Samaritan in the story? Is it us? My experience has been this. Good Samaritan story is the wounded man on the side of the road, and two religious leaders come by, don't give him the aid he needs to get better, and a Samaritan comes by, puts him on his donkey, takes him to an inn, pays for the charges, say, make sure this man gets better, here's some money now, I'll pay you whatever's left at the end of this. I, as a Christian, with my own biases, hates, isms, and phobias, I'm the wounded man on the road. And my Muslim sisters and brothers, they bandage me. They're the ones who took me, put me on their mule, sent me to the inn, said, take care of this man, whatever he needs, and I'll repay everything else that you need. See, we have to turn this story on its head and start not seeing ourselves as the Good Samaritan always, but maybe the fact that we're also wounded. We're wounded by our biases, our hatreds, our fears, and our ignorance. And it is when we talk to each other in real ways, flesh to flesh, eye to eye, that we get to see each other for who we are. The philosopher Soren Kierkegaard said that a neighbor is someone you see. He takes that from that wonderful passage from 1 John, Those who say, I love God, and hate their brothers or sisters are liars. For those who do not love a brother or sister whom they have seen cannot love God whom they have not seen. The commandment we have from him is this: those who love God must also love their brothers and sisters also. One last 3 learnings I want to give with you, and then we'll get to the real best part of the show. Here's the common word document. You can see this as well. 3 learnings, and how not just Islam but Muslims practicing the faith of Islam have benefited me. The first is, sometimes my Christian position was less Christian than I assumed, and Muslims helped me to see that. You know, in jurisprudence, the way law is developed, there's multiple sources at play. And you draw from the Quran, you draw from the sayings of the prophets, from the saying of the prophets. You even draw from, contrary to popular opinion, you draw from the Old Testament. You draw from the Gospels. You draw from reason. And you draw these things, you develop, and it has to be a consensus of scholars for law to be law. And what I was motivated by is the way they handled their sources. They were very clear that these were multiple sources. Each had their own weight, each had their own benefit, each had their own blind spots, and they needed each other. And what happened was that sometimes I was grabbing from the source of culture, and I was calling it gospel. And it was the way jurisprudence was done that helped me to introspectively see, okay, I need to handle my sources wisely, carefully, and with promise. That's the first thing I learned. The second thing I learned is that law, Sharia, taught me how to not devalue sanctification. It's a Christian notion of growing in faith, lived action, lived life, even as I privilege grace. In other words, how to not devalue law even while I privilege grace. I call this the Protestant's predicament. Like we went happy with grace, that we probably undid law too much. The very basis of law, of Sharia, is a God of mercy. In Islam, there is no tension between law and grace, between law and love, between law and mercy, but actually they're one and the same. And it's called me to challenge, how do I see that in my own faith? How do I take the requirements of faith and the gifts of faith and put them together in a way that gives life to me and to those around me? Then the last one, which I've been hinting at throughout this whole thing, is I need Muslims to be as faithful to God as they are called to be for my own sake. And I humbly pray that Muslims will say the same of me. At the end of the day, the biggest, most obvious thing that Muslims and Christians share, many other faiths too, but we're focusing on these two, is that we believe that faith must be lived. Lived out in the world, lived out in our personal life, lived out in our relationships, lived out in the way we do policy and the way we do politics, lived out in the way we handle our money, lived out in the way we treat our neighbors. Faith is to be lived out. It's not just a doctrinal statement that we assent to, but it's a living force that shapes our life. And when you do that, you realize that the best way to know Muslims, as Christians, the best way to know Islam is to know Muslims. The best way. I can give you books. I got books upstairs. Really pricey ones I was talking about. Some of the books are pricey. You can read them if you like. Go nuts. But the best way to know Islam is to know those who hold Islam near and dear to them. And so that's what I want us to end with today. So I've invited Dunian Ramadan. I asked if there was a honorific title I was supposed to use. She said, please, Dunian, it's fine.
Yeah.
So please, Dunian, please join me. And please let's give Dunian another one.
Thank you.
This chair has a loose screw.
Uh-oh.
So I may be out on the count halfway through this conversation.
Have my camera ready.
Yeah, Facebook. Thank you for being here so much. I guess I'll start with just a really basic question. Have you always been a person of faith?
Well, thank you all for having me, really. I haven't had a chance to say thank you. And I think these kinds of spaces today more than ever are very important. Just to come together and to kind of share with each other our own stories, so that we can just humanize each other, aside from our labels, everything. So as to my personal faith, I don't remember a time when I didn't believe in God, and I think that goes back to my parents instilling that in me. But my parents were not, they were Muslim by name. At the time when I was younger, they weren't practicing their faith at all. Both of my parents come from Lebanon, and so Lebanon is almost 50% Christian. And so, they grew up, my father came here when he was only 13, so he didn't really have pretty much any religion. And then my mother went to Christian schools, and she didn't know anything of the faith as well. So, but they kind of knew, we believe in God, and we turn to God for our prayers and when we ask God for things. And at the time they were not even, they wouldn't perform formal prayers. But we sort of, when I was younger, we sort of grew as a family to be a little bit more practicing into the faith. And I think for me, one of the turning points was when my father had decided he was going on pilgrimage when I was in elementary school. And at the time, we didn't really there was no internet, so like today, there was no access to books or anything, but he came back from his trip with a suitcase full of books. Just anything he could find, he bought it and he brought it with him. And so I was little, just a 10, 11-year-old, but I read all his books. I would